So our next question is, what advice would you give to adults supporting young people at school who haven't got a diagnosis, but you suspect might be neurodiverse?
So I think you would be looking to put the same support you put in place for anyone. So rather than focusing on a diagnosis or looking at diagnostic criteria and trying to kind of discern what specific diagnosis or diagnostic threshold this child may or may not meet, instead look at need. And again, come back to looking at that uncertainty and understand how that is driving the difficulties they're experiencing. And so really then reconceptualizing the kind of needs this child or young person has within that framework around uncertainty, because that brings it back into the realms of the human universal. It re-empowers you to realize that actually you don't need a clinician to come and give you specific advice here. Let's not saying there aren't still occasions where that's going to be necessary, but certainly your first port of call is bring it back into the realms of the human universal and realize, okay, this behavior is exactly what anyone else would do if they were experiencing uncertainty in this area or this area and this area. And I think the current situation with the pandemic has given everybody a much greater sense of empathy around uncertainty and the difficulties it can bring, and can also help us better understand behavior that might otherwise seem irrational or unexplained. So, for example, the pandemic, when it first broke around a year ago now, filled the world with uncertainty. And we had a huge amount of kind of uncertainty, particularly around structure, some of the fundamental understanding of how the world works and how it operates that we were faced with. What you then saw was this exaggerated need for control, this desperate search for certainty in the face of this uncertainty. And you had a lot of behaviors that seemed irrational. So going out and buying all the toilet paper you could find, for example, that was an exaggerated need for control. Or you can see that increased efforts to get more knowledge. So, constantly scrolling through the news or looking for as much information as you could. These behaviors weren't necessarily adaptive. They didn't really help us out in the long run, but in the short term, they were kind of bringing us a little bit more certainty to try to address the uncertainty we were experiencing. And so in looking at supporting children and young people that are struggling, it's again taking a step back, realizing it's uncertainty that's driving their difficulties. And it's saying, where is that uncertainty? And how can I reduce that? So can I do some work around structure, look at my learning environment, look at what uncertainty I'm bringing to this situation, and I can address that first and foremost, and then look at some of the work that might be a bit more long-term around social and or sensory. And again, within the book, there's lots of different activities there to sort of help in those areas. But really, what we're also hoping is that through an understanding of this 3S model, we can also empower you to be able to more intuitively design support yourselves as well.
And just to go back to that question and think of a classroom example. So if you bring to mind a student who you're finding hard to engage, and you know that they're not engaged because they are talking, either calling out to you or talking to the people around them, they might be doing anything they can to get the attention of people who are sitting next to them. They might be tapping pens, they might be a sort of an exaggerated need for movement, but whatever they're doing, they're not engaging. And instead of seeing these students as difficult or naughty, we take those as signals that they are getting a whole lot more certainty through what they're doing than they are by engaging in what it is we're asking them to do. Okay, so it's about looking at those behaviors and thinking, wow, there's my search for certainty, got to find the uncertainty, what can I do? So you might then break down the task into smaller steps for that student. You can do it in a variety of ways. Leave them with one step and then tell them you'll come back. when they finish that step and lead them on to the next. So there you're giving them a kind of social certainty of, I will respond to you, I will be back, that's under your control. You do that short step, I'll come back and talk to you about it. And you're doing it by building in that structure. So those are the kind of ways that we hope this model helps you not only come up with some strategies, but to just look at the whole of behaviour in a different way. So all these unexpected behaviours in the classroom we see as an example of somebody's search for certainty.
And fundamentally, as Claire, what we're trying to do is to increase control or sense of agency, or increase knowledge. So those examples there were all based on that. And that's why, going back to the points around universal design for learning, that idea of providing choice, you're giving somebody control there, which helps to reduce some of that uncertainty. I've made this decision, I've decided to do this. Because remember, for most children, young people, they haven't chosen to come to school. They've had to come to school. So already there's a reduction in one of my levers for managing uncertainty is being reduced there. My sense of control, my sense of agency. And the more that reduces, the more you might then see an exaggerated need for control come out in some of those behaviors that we perceive as being problematic. And it's remembering for that child or young person, that behavior is not a problem. That behavior is a solution to a problem. It might not necessarily be the best one, like buying loads of toilet paper or endlessly scrolling through the news, but it's my solution. So it's our job to help me with a better solution in the short term, and in the long term, how we can kind of increase my capacity to handle that uncertainty, or to remove it if it doesn't need to be there.